Hi, my name is Jade Fennick. I'm the head of legal at ENDES, and in this video we'll be speaking about VFA Service Providers. So VFA Service Providers are those service providers within the crypto industry, such as exchanges, OTCs, custodians and portfolio managers, who fall within the scope of the Maltese Virtual Financial Assets Act as service providers. So basically, a service provider would fall under the scope of the VFA Act when the service is offered in or from within Malta and in relation to virtual financial assets, being the token asset class regulated by the VFA Act. In fact, the VFA Act provides for a licensing framework for these service providers. It is important to note, however, that only legal persons who are registered in Malta are able to obtain a license as VFA service providers in Malta. The regulation of these services is motivated by the main three principles which underlie any financial services regulation, these being investor protection, market integrity, and financial soundness. So the VFA Act covers a total of 9 different VFA services, which are classified into 4 different classes. So Class 1 would cover the reception and transmission of orders, the provision of investment advice, and the placing of virtual financial assets. However, this class does not cover the holding of clients' assets. Class 2 licenses then allow licensees to provide any VFA service except the operation of a VFA exchange and dealing on own account, but here we see that it allows the licensees to hold and control clients' assets. Class 3 similarly allows licensees to provide any VFA service except from the operation of a VFA exchange. So we see the added service basically of dealing on own account, which is included in this 3rd class. And finally, the 4th class basically covers all the VFA services that are regulated under the Act. So generally speaking, the licensing process is split into 3 different phases. There's the preparatory phase, the pre-licensing phase, and the post-licensing phase. So the first step would be for the prospective licensee to appoint a VFA agent, being a licensed advisor under the VFA Act, who would basically guide the applicant all throughout the application, as well as review and submit the necessary application and supporting documentation to the MFSA, being the competent authority who processes and issues licenses under the VFA Act. The VFA agent also acts as the main point of communication between the applicant and the MFSA. So the hand-holding relationship between the VFA agent and the applicant is not an ongoing one, and in fact it ends upon the submission of the application to the MFSA. Having said so, the applicant, then the licensee, would need to have in place at all times a compliance officer who would basically ensure that the licensee is fulfilling any ongoing obligations. So the process overall is quite extensive, and the team behind the prospective licensee has to be prepared to provide all the necessary documentation and information, as well as having a proper business plan in place with proper financial forecasts as well. A very important test that the applicant entity and the involved persons have to undergo is the fitness and properties test. In fact, this is carried out both by the VFA agent initially as well as by the authority. In fact, involved persons have to submit a personal questionnaire for the MFSA's assessment. The 3 main aspects upon which the fitness and properties test is based include the integrity of the involved persons. So here we're looking at AML aspects, collection of police conducts, for instance, and doing public searches. The second aspect is the competence of such persons. So we're looking at qualifications and the level of experience in the industry. And finally, the financial soundness of both the applicant entity and the involved persons. Once the VFA agent is satisfied that the entity and the involved persons are fit and proper, and that the application, together with any policies and procedures, are properly drawn up and complete, this is submitted to the authority, and the authority then reverts with any requests for clarifications. Once the MFSA is satisfied with the applicant and the application, an approval in principle would be issued. This is then followed by another 3 months, during which the applicant would need to iron out any details as required by the MFSA. Once everything is confirmed to be up to the MFSA satisfaction, the license is then issued. So the first thing to mention here is that licensed VFA service providers are considered as subject persons for the purpose of AML/CFT regulations. In fact, a licensed VFA service provider would need to have an MLRO appointed after being approved by the MFSA and following an interview with the FIAU as well. The requirements are also very heavy on proper AML/CFT policies and procedures. These are in fact first assessed by the authority at a higher level to gauge the applicant's readiness in terms of the level of compliance which is requested from licensed service providers, and then the authority delves deeper into the internal AML/CFT framework of the applicant, including their business risk assessment and the customer risk assessment. The authority also scrutinizes the source of wealth and source of funds of both the applicant business as well as the qualifying shareholders and the promoters. Ultimately, the authority's main aims are to protect the investors and the public, to protect the reputation of Malta, to promote innovation, competition and choice, and also to ensure the reputability and suitability of the applicant and the persons involved. This is extremely important to uphold, especially given the type of industry that we are dealing with here, and also for Malta to ensure that it associates itself only with reputable persons and businesses. Indeed, the MFSA is required to refuse a license in certain instances, such as where the applicant either provides misleading, inaccurate, or incorrect information, where the applicant is not fit and proper, or where the application was not submitted in the required form. The MFSA also has the power to cancel or suspend a license which has already been issued, and in certain instances, the MFSA also has the power to issue fines or penalties which can go up to 150,000 per breach. A licensed VFA service provider needs to ensure that it continuously satisfies requirements, including the minimum capital requirements, and that it continuously complies with any obligations under the VFA Act and AML/CFT regulations. In fact, a licensed VFA service provider has to also submit an annual certificate of compliance, basically confirming such ongoing compliance.